Everyone to Termites, Friends or Foe, Nature's Miracles with our guest speaker, Margot Blues. This will be a short PowerPoint presentation which will touch on termite evolution in Australia, pest species often encountered in the Sydney area and differing characteristics of these termites, termite identification, nests and typical damage caused by termites. For 16 years, Margot Blues was a member of the voluntary research group, All Things Termite. The group was led by retired Forestry Commission entomologist, Mr. Philip Hadlington, with other members equally qualified and experienced. Margot currently works as a consulting arborist with a specialty into termite identification and treatment with trees. Welcome, Margot.
Thank you very much. Now, can you see my screen, Andrew?
I can see you, but you need to share your screen. Just press share screen at the bottom.
Okay. Screen. And
yep.
Can you see?
Yeah.
All good. Okay. Let's get going. So termites have been a big part of my life for a long time. I got into this because I had actually termites at home and had them treated as people normally do. And I was incredibly dissatisfied with the outcome plus the chemicals that I was still smelling 6 months after the treatment of my house. I had very small children, like babies at that time, and I was just very, very concerned about the toxicity level of it. So that was my introduction to it. So what we're looking at now is the Cathedral Termite Mound, which is it's one of the largest termite mounds in the world, and it's found really only in the Northern Territory. Termites that we're going to be speaking about are basically Sydney, commonly found in the Sydney area. The ones, yes, and so for your reference, the termites that we're basically going to be talking about are 5 millimeters in length only, and that's a typical size for the subterranean termites in Sydney. Slide number 2. So the classification, we have the subterranean termites, which is where we get most of our major damage to our houses from. They're classified as the subterranean termites. We have the dampwood termites, which are basically a problem of horticulture, including forestry, where these termites form galleries in wood and just basically reduce the value of timber logs, or they ring bark trees, ornamental trees. The drywood termites, we're not going to talk about those, but just know that there's 3 classifications of termites within the area. Part of the identification for termites is based on the soldiers only. It is basically the only reliable source of identification because of the characteristics of the mandibles, the size of the soldiers, the shape of the head. So you can see from this slide, just very, very quickly, if you have a look, the mandibles, can you see my, just a moment. Sorry, I'm just thinking about a pointer. So you can see that the mandibles are quite unique to each of them. So with the shape, length, whether they're toothed, whether they're sable-shaped, or in the case of the bottom right-hand, whether they have a pointy, what we call nasute-shaped head. So all of you people, termites have often been anecdotally classified as flying ants. They're not, they're termites. So what we have here, the image on the left-hand side is an ant, and we can see that they have elbowed antennae and they have pedicellated bodies. So the body parts are segmented into the head, thorax, and abdomen, And on the right-hand side with the termite, they have two pairs of equal-sized wings. Their body is not segmented and they have straight antennae. Usually the winged termites can be dark in color, similarly to ants, but they tend to be more chocolate brown rather than a black, which we find with ants. Termites is another picture of termites, and they're blind. They do not have any eyes. These are the soldier ones. The top image, you can see they have a fontanelle with a little round where the arrow's pointing. This is a defense mechanism where a lot of the termites will excrete a protective substance. It's usually an acidic, caustic for ants, because ants are their main predators. Termites are rather defenseless. They just are successful because of the numbers that they have. And a side-on profile of an ant, you can clearly see the elbowed antennae. They have eyes and they've got the pedicellate bodies, and they're dark in colour. Life cycles of termites. There will be generally there will be on the colonizing flight is where the winged termites, or the alates, which are the sexual reproductive termites, will go on a colonizing flight. They pair up, male and female pair up, and they become the primary parents, if you like, of the next developing nest. Usually they'll let thousands and thousands of these alates go. They're poor flyers, and they usually are quite reliant upon a moist, humid atmosphere, and most of them do not survive. Most of them get preyed upon by other creatures, birds, insects, frogs, lizards, etc. And also a lot of them perish because they don't find the most opportune areas in which to land, drop their wings, mate, and then have a food source to start the next colony, the next generation. This large termite in the middle of the screen is a queen termite. She can be up to 3 to 4 centimeters in length, sometimes a little bit larger. On her back is a soldier termite that you can see there. And typically it's about 5 millimeters in length. So you can actually see how big she is. She is just an egg-laying machine. When she gets to this size, she's just in her prime, and she's just pumping out eggs to replenish and rebuild the workers that or castes that have perished, and or put energy into the sexual ones. And you can see down the bottom is the winged termite, which will go on the colonizing flight. These 2 queens here are actually dead termites a termite mound that we sort of unearthed at Phil Hadlington's house, I might add, and he, unbeknownst to him. And sometimes they produce what we call supplementary queens when the queen herself or the primary queen is starting to fail. So what they'll do is the pheromones of the nest will signal that they need to have supplementary queens for the survival. So here again, the 2 white look like grubbies. They're again supplementary queens, and that's what the nesting material looks like. It's very, very light in color. It's very, very, very well insulated, and it's quite strong. It's a little bit sort of more robust than paper mache, but it basically these chambers where the eggs are laid, and the worker termites will just go about their business, cleaning, feeding, and just doing nursery work for the nest. The next slide is our Nasuta. So we look at the termite that's on the right-hand side, the smaller one. It's the soldier, and it's where the identification process happens from. So it doesn't, the Nasuta, which are the ones that build the big, dark, arboreal nests in trees that everyone's familiar with, this is what this little soldier looks like. Then the one in the middle is the worker termite, and you can see the dark coloration of its abdomen, which is suggestive that this termite has been feeding on a dark timbered cellulose, a tree with dark, like a mahogany or something like that. The white termite, which is a developing sexual alate, you can see the wing buds starting to form, and of course they're two equal-sized wings. This one is not blind, and as it develops, if it's to leave the colony, it will start to darken for insects called chitin, which allows it to be out in the open, and it doesn't desiccate through the dry atmosphere. And little Nasuta again, and these little guys are amazing. So they will build leads across rocks, across roads, up trees. You'll see slides coming up further. Note again the little, what we call Nasuta heads, the ones with the beak. Yeah. This is a different type of termite. This is Shedorina termes, and it's commonly found in Sydney. It's a very shy termite species. It does not build mounds in the Sydney area. And this one has two-sized soldiers only when it has a very mature and robust nest. So again, we can see the winged one down on the right-hand lower. In the middle of the screen, we can see a darker, shorter one with a kind of a caramelly colour, and it's got a big buffy head on it. And then over left of that, sort of up, is a smaller soldier. So these termites typically will burrow into the root crown of trees, and for some reason or other in my work as a consulting arborist, they have such a preference for the tallow wood. So the Eucalyptus microcories, it's, if someone said, I've got a Eucalyptus microcories and it's got termites in it, I'm 98% sure it would be this kind of termite over other ones. So Mastotermes, we don't have them here. These are above the Tropic of Capricorn. They are a highly destructive termite in the Darwin and Northern Australian area. Just for your sake, they're probably one of the largest termites that we have. They're about 12 millimetres, so just over a centimetre in length. These ones are dampwood termites, and again, they're quite large as well, but we would very rarely see those in a tree unless, we're having work done on a tree because it's losing branches or the tree's being removed, and as the boys are cutting up the tree, you would see the galleries and these termites coming out, but they're really not a problem of built structures at all. Now, these little guys, these are Coptotermes, and these are the most widespread of termites throughout Australia, all but the very, very cold highland regions of the snowy, and I don't believe they're in Tasmania, but everywhere else throughout Australia. And these are the most destructive ones, very, very populated colonies, over 1 million termites. They like to eat everything. They'll eat plastic, they'll eat cellulose, they'll eat anything you like. And so these are the ones where you see, like a Current Affairs or the television shows where these people have actually lost their house through termite attack. It's these guys that do it. So this is a log that fell off a black butt. It fell in one of the parks at Willoughby during or just after a major East Coast low storm event, and I had the great opportunity of going and photographing this tree. And just these little white little numbers, these are just a small segment of the worker termites in one colony. It was a big tree. So we're all familiar with these dark nests, these Nasuta walkeri, which we have in Sydney. There's a different species when we go further north, but just for the east coast of New South, or the lower east coast of New South Wales, we'll get these termite species. The nest is large. The queen typically is not in this arboreal area. She's usually down in the root crown of, and this is just a nursery chamber where, you know, the worker termites again feed and do the nursery duties. What's really great about these termite nests is the other fauna that habitates these nests. So we'll get things like native bees, we'll get lizards, we'll get kookaburras, we'll get other birds that will actually use this nesting material to incubate their eggs as a safe and easy harborage for their offspring. Yeah, so these are made out basically from a bit of soil, earthen material, from saliva and from fecal material from the termites. Once the termite nest or the termites have been eradicated or moved from the area, these nests typically will fall down within about a 2 to 4 week period, depending on the size and its exposure, but it will just simply collapse off the tree and fall to the ground. Other termites, so this is another Nasuta termes, but this one's exsidiosus. So this one builds mounds, and typically the mound will be next to, if not adjoining, a hardwood post or tree. These termites tend to be quite destructive if they get a bit of a hold on in your house, but typically not quite as bad as the previous termite that I mentioned, the Coptotermes. Another mound right next to a hardwood tree. I actually don't know what the species of termite of this one was, but it just gives you the general idea of a mound next to a hardwood. It's classified as a hardwood. So another one is in the root crown of a tree, no nest, but the termites would be down there. So the blade of grass that you can see will be, this is me, which was pushing the blade of grass down into the chamber, and when that was pulled out, there was termites attached to that blade of grass defending the nest. Coptotermes, which are the bad guys, what you see here is this mudding, and this is really characteristic of a nest which has been long standing within that tree. So you can see the mudding, and often, you know, we think, you know, maybe children have thrown mud against a tree or something's happened to make it mud up, but really it's the workings of termites. Everything's fair game for Coptotermes. So again, this is your Phoenix canariensis palm tree, and a long time ago with Phil Hadlington, we went to a place up in Beecroft, in the northern suburbs of Sydney, and yeah, it was a pretty kind of sad situation. There was an elderly woman who was quite infirm living in this house, and the place was pretty well overrun with termites. So again, signs of termites with this mudding at the base of the tree. And if you look very carefully on the base of the tree itself, on the base of the trunk, you can see the mudding extending up in the little bark crevices of the tree, another telltale sign of termites. Again, this is a citrus tree, and you can see these little sort of lighter squiggles on the base of the trunk. Again, termite infestation. So this tree has now been removed. It was in the grounds of the Greenwich Hospital, and you can see the trees actually, health-wise, the trees deteriorating. They're quite old. They were quite old, and they had a heritage listing on them. But if you have a look above the first branch, just close to the ground area, you can see where a branch has been cut off, and it's all sort of lighter in colour. That was just termite mudding for this tree. And, you know, patients were actually sitting underneath this tree. There was tables and chairs and things, and we just decided it was easier to do a little bit of a risk assessment and prevent the people from being there. So there's a closer up of that same area, and you can see the extensive mudding on that tree, on the trunk of the tree, Termites. And we think this is a close-up shot, like a zoomed-in photograph, and there was definitely a cavity in the top of the tree. And we think that on one of the colonizing flights of this species, Termites, there was a very real chance that it actually found this level and descended down into the tree, where there's lots of moisture, food, decaying matter, and safety, of course. So termites are really important. We kind of need them for habitat reasons. We need termites because they're nature's recyclers. They will take decaying wood and they will convert it into nutrients back into the soil so that other plants and animals can actually take it up. So termites have a really, really important function in our ecological cycles that we have. So what we also have is, particularly with Termites, our number one bad guys for damaging property, is we have these flight cuts. Now, flight cuts are really, really subtle. They're much, much easier to see in a rough bark tree. And they actually look like old branch scars. So where a tree's lost a branch and then they've put this new wood on to close up that cavity. We can see here there's a little bit of light sandy tissue at the bottom of it, which is also an indication that the termites are active within this tree. Here's another flight cut. So what we do is we shave where that vertical crack is in the middle of the blemish of the scarring, to see if we can see any mudding in there. Now, if we can see mudding in there, there's a very good chance that the termites have actually used this flight cut to launch their sexual alates on a colonizing flight. And here it is again on a smooth bark eucalypt. It mimics a branch loss, which is basically how the tree just puts on more wood, new wood every year to get this shape. Here's a flight cut which has been shaved. So we've gently shaved it, and you can see the middle line is definitely had mudding in it, which is an indicator of termite activity. Now we're going into a little bit of a boroculture here. So yes, it's termite related. So that middle concertinaed circular bit is the actual nest. But a lot of people think that because the trees had the presence of termites in it, that the tree's structurally unsound. That we as arborists do mathematical calculations to determine the structural integrity of the tree. And in this one, you can quite clearly see that there's very, very limited good wood on the perimeter of the tree, and there's not much on the inside of the tree. So we have a ratio of 30-70. So basically when there's 70% of the trunk gone and 30% remaining, that's kind of like our signal point that the tree really ought to come down. If that nesting material in the middle of the tree was a lot less, the tree would be fine. It would be able to withstand quite a lot of external force pressure on it, such as wind, rain, etc. And here we go, just explaining the 70-30 ratio that we have. You can see that a lot of trees are actually hollow inside, but because there's no open cavity that we can see in, we're quite oblivious to which trees are hollow and which ones aren't. I beg your pardon. So this is just a little cartoon demonstration of the 70-30 ratio that we work from. This slide is interesting. This is in an Angophora floribunda, and it was down at Avalon. So the picture on the left-hand side where the arrow's pointing, that's the utility arborist actually taking down some branches. If we go to the top right image, this timber, this log has clearly had two termite species in it at the same time. I witnessed this. So where the top red arrow is pointing around the solid wood and there's those little hollows in there, that's the kind of damage that damp wood termites do. So they're called ringent termites, and they will just hollow out the outer layers of the timber. And then in the middle where it's hollow, so the second lower red arrow, that was being occupied by Nasutotermes walkeri, so the ones with a big black nest. Interestingly, I haven't found that this in, talking about the bottom right photograph, we now got those two white circles, and in those white circles are two tiny little cavity hollows, little circles that are, I think what these are, because termites are aerobic, they're not anaerobic, which means that they've got to breathe. And I think that these little circles, and I found it a lot on trees with termite activity, they're little breathe holes to just let the air in and air out. I could be wrong, but just an observation. So the same log from the previous termite, and then where the arrow's pointing, they're the dampwood termites down in the bark area, the outer area. And of course you can see the internal hollowing up on the top right-hand side where it's darker going in. Now, Coptotermes again, they, in the Sydney area, what they do is they actually build their nests usually in the basal crown of a tree. So the basal area of a trunk. And here what we can see is the trunk has actually been cut both laterally and longitudinally. And what we can see is that central area is the nesting material of Coptotermes. They can be incredibly difficult to locate the colony. We know they're there because we see them and we see the activity, but trying to find the colony is what we try and do to actually eradicate the termite and their subsequent damage. So it's kind of important to know where the colony is originating from. Sometimes it's impossible to find that, and then what the pest control industry has done has introduced termite baits so that they will treat this nest remotely with baits that are scattered around the property, and the termites will then go and feed off these impregnated baits and then carry the poison back, and slowly the colony will die. So again, the tree had a termite colony. You can see that down the bottom, just at the bottom, not the arrow section, but down the bottom, you can see that sort of, it looks a bit mashy, for want of a better word. But where the arrow is pointing to in this one, this is a termite flight cut. So when the termites are, and the nest is mature, i.e. it's produced sexual alates, the worker termites will come up the tree and they will actually cut a channel in the side of the tree, an opening in the side of the tree to enable the launching of the alates. Termites are pretty bad flyers, as I've mentioned before. So they take advantage of an elevated area in order for the winged ones to fly. Now we've all seen this black mark up and down the tree is a termite lead, but that's for Nasuta termes. They're great. They're just a standout. They're not camouflaged, and the purpose of these leads is to access deadwood up in the trees itself, and these are called mud tubes or shelter tubes. So the termites will use these as a highway to access both up and down the tree. Sorry. So now this part of the talk, we're talking about the damage characteristics of different termite species. So this one here is Copter termes. It's a piece of Oregon. And if you can have a look, the termites tend to flute the timber, much like what you'd see on a cardboard box, where you've got these little vertical chambers happening in the timber. And I'm of the opinion that termites are incredibly smart little creatures. And what they will do is that each year as the timber grows, you'll have what we call new wood. So spring, early growth, fast grow, so soft new wood. And then later in the growing season, we'll have what we call sort of old wood, which is more dense and it's slower and there's just a little bit less cellulose available to it. So my theory again is that the termites are actually eating the new spring growth in this, which is why they get the fluting of the timber. And Copter termes will eat anything. They'll eat softwood, hardwood, cardboard stored, whereas the Nasuta termes with a big arboreal nest, they tend just to be hardwood feeders. Other damage, you can see this one is not fluted. This is hollowed out, particularly the bottom piece of timber. You can see that it's completely excavated. Looking at that, I would say it is definitely not Copter termes. The damage characteristic is not them. Similarly, for this one here, it's not Copter termes. It's been completely hollowed out. So it's either Shedderina termes or it's Nasuta termes that have done that. So getting back to Copter termes, timber in service, you can see this fluting, this horizontal striation of the timber if you look really hard. And also the mudding is very, very, very characteristic of Copter termes. So again, this is Oregon. We build a lot out of Oregon, and it's a particularly susceptible timber to termite attack. Copter termes, again, they'll take advantage of any situation. So stored logs, even though these ones, if you look down the bottom of the photo, you can see that they're stored above ground. It's just simply so that you put your head down with the torch and you can see whether or not the termites have actually crossed over and started to nest and feed on this decaying timber. Copter termes, again, this is in somebody's subfloor area, and the, well, rope piece of string you can see is a stalagmite. So what the termites have done is that they've somehow or other worked out that there's good pickings on the subfloor area of this place. And so they've started to make their standalone shelter tube in order to access the roof area and start feeding on it. When you have a damp subfloor area, the timber bearers, joists and bottom of the flooring actually increasing humidity. So when timber's milled, we really like it to have about a 12% moisture content. It fluctuates a little bit, particularly when we have high humidity. The timber will absolutely absorb more. So in a subfloor area like this, which clearly is getting wet or staying wet, Once the timber's over an 18% moisture content level, fungi gets into it and it starts to break down the cellulose of the timber. And once that happens, it's very, very easy and very conducive for termite attack to occur. Stored material under the house. Again, you can see these stalagmites coming up. So in that box, I make the assumption that there's some sort of paper, which is cellulose, and the termites have found their way in there, and they're not stopping there. They now want to come up into the subfloor area for the bearers and joists. And that's what you get. And then pieces of timber, which are resting against the house, can act as wicks for termites to actually make an entrance into the house. And another one, subfloor area with a termite lead, very advanced coming in. This one here where the paving was lifted up looks like a fairly old house, but you can see where the arrows are, you know, and the whitish sort of leads there, which was termite access occurring. Again, underneath the house, where there's some grass, and if you have a look at the bottom, the staining of the floorboards, you can see quite clearly that this area is quite wet, and the termites are capable of actually accessing the middle portion of the grass in order to get up to where they want to go. So again, moisture beading on the subfloor area, and you can kind of see that there's a little bit, sorry, beg your pardon. So there's a little bit of brown rot, which is starting to happen in the timber anyway. Yeah, very, very conducive to termite attack. Similarly, the staining on the floor and the mudding, you know, Coptotermes again. Building practices, so you can see that the log lying on the ground is completely shot, completely destroyed by the termites, and you know, home builders, building practices sometimes are just very conducive for termite attack. And this one here is Termes with its dark leaves. So these are the arbor cult, the arbor, the ones that build the nests up in the tree. These are very typical of that with their dark leads. No other termite makes these dark leads as dark as that they do. And if you see anything suspicious in your house, like a little mud, little area pointing to that, go and have a look, because a lot of people just come and they keep cleaning it up and it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back. It's a real indication of termite activity. This was in a school, and finally they got rid of it. And we're back now to the house. I said that the sad house up in Beecroft, and you know, where there was an infirm lady. This was such a learning exercise for me. It was so sad and so extraordinary. So the mudding was there. Nobody came to visit this lady, I'm pretty sure. And anyway, so the garage, the paneling was pulled off the garage wall, and you could see the extensive mudding behind that. And again, if you look very, very carefully at the timbers, it's got that fluting characteristic of Coptotermes. So the dark area again is just mudding behind the old fibro sheeting of the garage, just extensive. More mudding, and again, a rafter damaged. Again, the mudding all around the timber. It's just a dead giveaway. So this is an old cupboard in that lady's place. When we opened the cupboard, that's what we found. It was just completely packed full of termite mudding. Very sad. Mudding in a broom cupboard that hadn't been opened. I think this was a little cottage down the back, and it hadn't been sort of used for some time, and then went down and had a look, and of course there's the termite mudding. This was a oven, again, termite muddings had made merry with it. Wood piles, you can see the mudding around the logs there. Again, Coptotermes. They'll get everywhere. Power poles, this sandstone coloured mudding, Coptotermes and the mudding. Sleeper walls, which thank goodness are a little bit out of vogue at the moment. And this one is yours truly's hand, and this is Nasuda being the darker timber on a hardwood power pole. That was up in Wurunga. A fireplace that hadn't been used, full of termite mudding. So we're getting into treatment, which I'm not really going to cover too much about it tonight, but this tree was drilled and a piece of grass or small poked into the hole, and the resultant is when that's pulled out, the termites are actually attacking the grass to defend the nest, and that's sort of our clue that there's good activity going on. Trees with termite nests in them usually have, and then we can take the temperature. It's usually around about the 36-degree mark, and it's a constant temperature in the nursery. It's important for their survival. Very old-fashioned, but this is dusting the termites. I don't do this. I tend to use a liquid now. And this is where the liquid's being injected into the tree. And for my talk, it's really important because termites create habitat for all and sundry. Very important for our fauna, and particularly in light that, you know, Sydney's becoming a busier place, more built out, more intolerant to things like climate change and defective trees. So our hollows are disappearing at an alarming rate, and we actually need these creatures. Everything's kind of interdependent upon each other, you know, for a healthy ecosystem. So that's basically the end of my general termite talk. Now, I'd like to talk about a project I've been so fortunate to be involved in with the North Sydney Council, which is the Bull's Head Berry Island project that they've had operational. And yeah, so a little bit about it was that the isolated bushlands of both the headlands of Berry Island and Bull's Head had a very high representation of the Nasuda walkeri, so the arboreal mound nesting species. And we were actually testing to see whether or not tree health would improve if the reduction of foraging termites were reduced. And so anyway, you can see with this first slide that I've got up here, there's a number of little holes within the actual nest itself, you know, which is an indicator of other creatures utilizing the termite nest for shelter, habitat, nesting, and nesting. And so this is not a particularly clear one, but this was the GIS area of predetermined trees that were chosen by the council, and subsequently we went in to identify the trees, which ones had nests and which trees were going to be treated. So we didn't treat all the nests in there. It was just a selection of certain trees. So this one here is Eucalyptus resinifera. You can clearly see this chocolate mudding on the bark. And when I first started to assess the trees, this bark was very thin and very, very crumbly. So the bark typically was, you know, 1 to 2 centimeters thick. And these trees that have been severely affected by the termites grazing really only had this outer skin, and there was nothing much left underneath that. Very interesting. So what happened after we treated these termites, and I went back a number of years later, the bark improvement on these trees was quite remarkable. Yeah, it was great to see that such change had occurred. So if we didn't, some trees will succumb to it, succumb to termite activity, and you can quite clearly see here that this tree was dead, but the mudding up the tree was quite intensive. Again, this is up near the picnic area of Ball's Head, and one of the trees up there, I think it was tree 20 or tree 21, and you can quite clearly see the mudding on this tree. The termites were still active in this tree and doing their thing. And again, this one's up near the toilets for those who are familiar with oh no, sorry, I beg your pardon. This one's over on the western side, on the way past the toilets, and yeah. And this was really interesting because this termite nest was kind of by itself. Like the others were in clusters, and this one was by itself. But the other thing too, I did note when I was there, is these nests typically are about 4 meters in height above ground. And typically they face to the north or the northeast. It was an observation. Whether or not it's, that's what they do, I don't know. But yeah, it was just an observation of mine. It was pretty interesting. Now, some trees, such as the Angophora costatus, will get the leaves coming up the tree, but very, very rarely will they get the actual nest forming within the canopy of the tree. And we think that's because the Angophoras have the annual bark shed, and when they shed the bark's actually quite thick. It's a 2 to 3 millimeters thick, and it basically just throws off the termite leaves. So the termites kind of, beg your pardon, so the termites kind of think, yes, we'll go and feed and extract the cellulose out of the dead wood in the trees, but that we won't build a nest in the trees. So this slide here, you can see between the nest and the side of the trunk, you can see that vertical crack happening. That's an indication that the termite nest has been killed, basically, and the worker termites haven't continued to affix the nest to the tree. So in a short period of time, that whole nesting structure will just fall from the tree. And again, a close-up of the various creatures which might nest in the tree. And I think that's the last slide.
Oh, wow, that was fantastic, Margot. Would you mind stopping the presentation? Just press stop.
Done.
Great. We have do we have any questions from the audience for Margot? I'll just ask you to. I think I put a few questions there. I think you answered, actually. Can you just repeat what the termite mounds are made out of? What's the composition?
The composition is it's a combination of earthen materials, so soils, fecal materials, so what the termites have digested and their waste product, as well as saliva. So they get those 3 components together, and they chew it up, and then they just start building the nest.
Yeah, because I'll often pick some of the nests up when I do walks with our children during the school holidays or with schools, and to me it's just like cardboard.
Yes.
They got the same feeling as cardboard, and it's really light.
Yes.
And it seems to have purpose, the design of them. Are the designs of those nests for airflow or temperature or something like that?
It certainly is. So it's for egg laying. So the temperature needs to be at a constant, kept at a constant temperature. And also the termites need to be able to move around and clean and do the housekeeping nursery work associated with it. Yes.
You did also mention the other animals that live in the nests, and what we've noticed in North Sydney are that kookaburras, there's quite a lot of kookaburras nest in them. So the larger holes are usually the kookaburras, and then we have smaller ones, which are the kingfishers. We get sacred, I believe, sacred kingfishers nesting in them, at least at Berry Island.
Lovely. And so what they do also is that they take it for the egg incubation temperature. They will take advantage of the heat of the termite nesting material, because it actually is quite thermally is a good thermal conductor. So the birds don't have to sit on their eggs quite as much in those termite areas, termite nests.
Ah, and so what should if people are concerned about termites, what should they do? If they suspect termites, what should the public do?
First and foremost, they should have them identified, because if you've got a tree, for example, out the front of your place, and you've got one of those large termite mounds in it, you know, the dark ones, the arboreal termites, usually do nothing, because those termites really, it's only on exceptionally rare cases will they actually attack the timbers in your house. For all the other, you should have your houses annually inspected for termites. Even if you think you don't live near bush, people store things underneath their houses, or you know, leftover building material under front porch stairs, the whole gambit, where the termites can actually take up residence, and you know, and you've got a problem occurring in the house next door or two houses away, and so you're still very much in that foraging zone of those termites. So you really do need to have your house checked. And if you find any termites, do not get the Baygon out, and do not get the spray out to spray them and think, aha, I've got you, you've gone. What the termites will do is, any termites returning, not mass termites, but termites coming back from a foraging, if they're contaminated in any way, the actual colony will shut them out. They will block them from coming in to stop disease or coming into the colony to protect the queen.
Okay. I wonder, Janet, do you have a question, or Anne, do you have a question?
Yes. Yes, I do, Andrew. I've put it, well, I thought I'd put it in.
Let's look. Yes, you did. How come I can't control that?
Sorry, I've done something here.
Was the laminated effect in the annular rings of the tree?
When that, yeah. Sorry, I'm not too sure how I handle this phone.
That's okay. I don't think the question was clear, Janet. So you were mentioning a laminated effect?
Oh, yes. There was a photo showing the narrow strips along looked like a plank, and it looked as though they'd sort of gone down. Well, I suppose Margot was saying they ate the spring wood.
Yep.
Rather than the
late wood. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So that's just my little theory as an arborist, and knowing how clever these little termites are. But what you find that with only one species, the Coptotermes termites, they will do this fluting. They will flute the timber. So instead of excavating it out holus bolus, they flute it. So they'll just eat little strips out of the timber. And my theory is that sometimes when you've got flooring down, for example, and depending on what part of the log that piece of flooring has been cut from, you will find that the termites might have a preference to one of the boards and not the one next to it or the one next to it. And that's all dependent on where on the log that
Yeah.
that piece of timber was milled from the cellulose content of that piece of flooring.
Yes, thanks. Fascinating.
Fascinating. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. Maybe I'll just bring Gareth into the conversation. Gareth, did you want to say anything about our project in North Sydney, what we've been working on with Margot?
I can. Margot pretty much covered it, but I mean the project that we've been working on with Margot, it started back in 2015, and that was after several years of the bushland team just observing the decline of health in the canopy in Bull's Head, particularly, but also Berry Island, and as part of this project, we looked at Cremorne Point and we looked at Badangi Reserve as well. And the observations were that that the Nasuthermes walkeri nests were seemingly overabundant and seemed to be having a negative effect on particularly the rough bark species. So the resiniferas, like Margot said, and the red bloodwoods, and also the black butts in particular. And you know, we didn't really know what to do about this because you know, it's not usual for bushland managers to go in and start exterminating native species that occur and are part of the ecology of the reserve. However, we also recognise that these urban remnants, you know, they're missing parts of their ecosystem. There's natural predators of the termites that would normally keep them in a balance, which are absent. They're also have an altered fire regime. So these areas of bushland would normally burn in a 10 to 15 year cycle, but also with variations in that duration. But we don't have that sort of a fire regime in our reserves. It's much longer between burns, and the burns are much smaller in extent. And then for Bull's Head particularly, we also have some introduced species of canopy tree, which this is just our observation, seem to resist termite attack, but provide, you know, maybe or help to support a higher than natural density of the nest. So all of these things were things that we were aware of and concerned about. And then in 2016, some funding became available from the federal government. So we applied for a grant to undertake this tree health assessment with Margot and to identify the trees most at risk of continual decline or continued decline, and then to treat those particular nests in proximity or within those particular trees. And you know, we've been back to monitor this project in 2017 and again in 2021, and you know, the results are positive. We're seeing an improvement, as Margot said, we're seeing an improvement in those target trees that we were trying to protect. So it's not across the board. We've obviously lost some trees, but by and large, the results have been positive. So yeah, it's been a worthwhile thing. And you know, I'm not aware of any other Sydney council that is actively trying to manage the abundance of Nasuthermes walkeri in their reserves. I mean, Margot works for several councils. She might know now other councils that have sort of followed this example, but I'm not aware of it.
I was invited many years ago for the Ride Council. They had a particularly, I don't know what happened. I don't know whether they got the funding or not, but yeah, so in one of their big sort of reserves, yeah, so I was kind of involved in that and the initial, and that was quite risky too, because there was lots of you know, running tracks and cycle tracks and kids and family that were running through the parks, rather than, you know, the Bull's Head, Berry Island, where they were very limited to a narrow track. And yeah, but anyway, I don't know what happened to that, but they were looking into to some sort of monitoring and culling of theirs as well, but I don't know what happened.
Well, I might ask a final question. Oh, no, we've got Janet, another one. Would cultural burning have an impact?
On termite in Bull's Head, is Janet?
Yes, well, just on termite health in general, would it to control them, having a more frequent fire regime, or
I'm not an ecologist, but I should imagine that the fire frequency and intensity is well documented by others. Would it make any difference to the termites themselves? Unless you had a really, really hot fire, I don't think it would make any difference whatsoever. They would just, if the leaves burnt on the trunks of the tree, they would soon and quickly reestablish those leads, and the termites that would perish in the fire would just be replaced by the queen.
I was thinking more in particular about the effect of the smoke.
No, because the termite leads tend to be encased, so I think that they would not suffer from any smoke inhalation or poisoning from the smoke. I think that they would be completely kept separate from it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Janet, for the question. I missed one from Anne. I might have to make this the second last one because I want to ask the last one. In addition, it's more like a comment. In addition to annual inspections of my house, it is recommended we should have some perimeter baits or the like for protection.
The short answer is yes. However, the baits around the house are not, they don't guarantee that they're going to intercept termites foraging on your patch. So you really need both. What the baits would do is, if you did discover that they were being attacked by termite activity, then it offers a remote source where the termites can actually be baited from. But still, the annual inspections go the annual inspections. No, yeah. You need the eyes and you need the torches. Yes.
Thanks, Anne. As a final question, what would you like people? What idea of termites would you like to leave with the general public? How should we feel about them?
We should, I suppose, celebrate them to a point. Obviously, tell that to somebody who's been severely economically impacted by them is not good. What we tend to do in Australia in particular is our building code, I believe, should be a lot better to build out termites, or to, for example, slab on ground construction is fraught with danger insofar as it typically, slab on ground is in newly established areas. We do have various Australian standards for slabs and for pipe work, etc., and for termite, but it's only as good as the person who's installing it. So for example, you know, I witnessed not terribly long ago a new house being built around the corner from me. Somebody had got it very wrong. It was a slab on ground. Somebody had got it really wrong. The pest control person had come in just to do the subs spray. And just before that, they realized that they had their heights wrong. So the bulldozer came back in and just scraped all the material off that had just been sprayed. So it's only as good as the person putting the terry mesh in or the you know, other barriers in for your place. And yeah, bit tough. So the people paid for it in good faith, and then it was pretty much removed the day after. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, Margot, I've heard the comment before, I don't know if it's true or not, is that Australia doesn't have any large native herbivores anymore like in the past, and that termites play that function in recycling a lot of organic matter.
Yes, you've got that
Yeah.
right. Yep. So particularly, you know, Australia has a very, very high representation of termite species, most of them of which have not been identified. And the vast majority of termites that we have are grass feeders. So if you think that the kangaroo is our largest herbivore, and the numbers in the Northern Territory of kangaroos are not that great, the termite, you know, the ecologists seem to think that our overrepresentation of termites has taken the place of those large bovine, like the buffalo animals that we see on other continents, but not Australia.
Mm.
And
well.
they're also really important for the Northern Territory simply because of the cyclical of the wet-dry season, the flooding, you know, the lack of food on the ground during the dry times. Yeah, they're fantastically amazing creatures, and their adaptation is truly to be embraced. Mm.
Well, I think we'll bring the talk to an end there. Thank you,
Thank
Margot,
you.
for coming along. Sorry
Thank
about
you.
the technical issues earlier.
Oh, yes, that's okay.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that talk. I hope everyone else did as well.
Lovely.
Absolutely, Margot. I loved it. And interestingly, years ago, I did Phil Hadlington's tree surgery course.
Oh, wow.
Which
Wow.
was
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah. Sadly, he died last year. So,
Did he?
yeah, he was a very elderly gentleman. You know, I think he was close to 100. Yeah, when he died.
Was he?
Wow.
He was a wonderful teacher.
He was a wonderful teacher. Yeah, 10 points to him. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
All right.
thanks everyone. I'd like to say good night to everyone, except for Margot. Stay there. And
Thank you, Andrew. Fantastic evening.
No worries, Janet. Hope to see you again soon. See you later, Anne.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Margot.
You're welcome.